So everyone knows that president. And it's unfortunate because he signs a lot of executive orders that we have to talk about that have to do with real estate and housing. And how are we going to talk about the guy's name, right? And there's even been some instances where his name is actually also a verb. Okay. So you may
Sure.
want to use that name as a verb, and you can't even use the verb. And the stupid social media companies
Wha
have ruined the English language. So
Yeah, what if I'm playing pinochle?
right,
I gotta be able to use that
right,
word.
exactly. Welcome to episode 106 of the Weekly Docket, a podcast by the Silberman Law Firm, where we talk legal news and practical law. Today is January 23rd, 2026. I'm Phil Silberman, owner of the firm, and I'm joined by Chris Heald, who's my co-host and our firm's supervising lawyer. Chris, you see that cheesy looking tennis trophy kind of on my mantle there?
I do see that.
Well, he played in a tennis match against two brothers. My brother and I played against two other brothers, and the deal is if you lose, you have to display the trophy on the mantle. So we were losers. So that's why we've got this ugly looking tennis trophy on the podcast. But Chris,
That's high stakes.
yeah,
I've never heard of a loser's trophy, and you have a podcast, so that's pretty high stakes. You gotta really display it.
these guys, super nice guys, by the way, good tennis players. They beat us, and it was a close match, but they swing as hard as possible on every shot. It's actually very rare to see people do that. And I was thinking it'd be like every single ball, throw caution into the wind and hit it as hard as you can. And you're either going to hit it out or you're going to hit a winner oftentimes. And they started out in this first set. And I mean to tell you, it was like every shot they hit was in. And you're thinking when you play that kind of match, you're thinking, how long do they keep this up? And tennis is often a microcosm of life. And some days you feel like your opponent is just on fire or things are going the wrong way. But you have to if you take a step back and you're like, statistically, how probable is this you? So, you know,
I mean, I guess I'm learning a lot in all of this. I didn't realize that isn't how you played. I thought you always hit the ball as hard as you can. I'm a very poor tennis player, but
uh,
what about these pros I'm watching at midnight and 2 a.m. when I'm working on Discovery
yeah,
in the Australian Open? Do they hit it as hard as they can every
no,
time? Or
no,
or
no. I mean, it's a risk reward thing. I mean, there's directional risk and then there's velocity risk. I mean, you can hit the ball, really hard that you often will find that you lose control. I mean, generally speaking, when I'm playing really well, I feel like I'm at about 75% racket head speed, right?
That's shocking. I thought, because obviously there's two guys that are head and shoulders above everybody else. I thought the reason they were so dominant was because they could play that way. Like they could hit the ball that much better than everybody else. You're saying they have an even higher gear if they
Oh,
really
for
wanted to.
certain. So anyway, congrats to my friends on the win, and that's why we've got that ugly looking trophy up there. All right, we got to move on, Chris. So, all right. What is on our docket today, my friend? We're going to answer a couple legal questions. We had a comment from a listener on our eviction episode that we did wanting us to do a property theft segment through deed fraud. So we're going to do that. And then we have a question about these HOA scams. Well, I call them HOA. They're actually resort property scams where typically working class people go out on a weekend, buy a very low value property, get stuck in the thing and figure out that the property is worthless. So we're going to talk about that. What happens? What do you do when you get one of those? And then finally, in our rant and rave section, we're going to be talking about bad words. All right. Not words that, I sometimes hear you say when you're having a bad day, Chris, but words that you shouldn't say on podcasts that are not traditionally bad words that get your post buried. And we've been having some of that happen. And we're going to talk about those words. And we'll probably just say them because we don't care. But we'll talk about what those words are. Correct.
Not the words that my wife says, I can count at least 5 times a day. I will just hear from the other room. You just randomly say,
Yeah, no, not that word.
I do that about 17 times a
No,
day.
those words are actually okay, I think.
Well,
We're talking about different words that get your post buried. So, all right, let's go ahead and get it kicked off with our legal question section. And this is from a listener. We just have to talk about deed fraud. People stealing properties through deed fraud. If you're a thief, a criminal, you can just go to your local convenience store. You go to your bank. You put on a mask, and you go in and you commit an armed robbery. This is not that. This is a little more sophisticated. Chris, do you know about these? We've done some cases about deed theft in normally some neighborhoods in Houston that are kind of where they're very common, or do I need to refresh your memory?
I'm very familiar, and I will tell you, I came to you from a probate background 12, 13 years ago. And when I started learning the ins and outs of specific real estate law and just how simple it was, I had the thought that all these criminals have, which is, holy cow, this is so much simpler than 99.9% of people think a property transfer is. I mean, it's harder for me to go to the ATM and withdraw $20 than it is for me to do a deed. There's a couple of just very obvious areas you could exploit. Now, it's criminal, it's wrong, but if you are a criminal looking to crime, it's very easy and it's shocking, and it was surprising to learn, wow, that is really all it takes to do a deed.
Yeah. So here's what's going on with the scam. Okay. If you're a criminal, you basically go form a bogus, or not a bogus, but you just go form a new LLC. You drive around a neighborhood, look for some vacant land and that no one's really paying attention to. Find yourself a crooked notary, go get a deed, and you basically pretend to be the owner of that land. And then as you completely forge the grantor's signature, and you sell it to yourself, or sell it to your LLC, and then the LLC markets it to a cash buyer, usually something like, a little bit lower than market value, or it's a really good deal for a quick sale. You take the cash and then you run. Okay. That's the scam. There's also another variation of that where it's called equity stripping, where you get the property put into your name, and then you go apply for a home loan of some sort, and then you get the money and you never pay it back. And then a foreclosure is done on the property. So that's another variation of it. They're very profitable, very high dollar scams. You're going to make a lot more money getting a 30 or 40 or 50,000 or even more expensive property than you are robbing a bank or a convenience store, probably. Okay. But I would say you're much less likely to be caught. I mean, I'm not trying to advocate people go rob convenience stores or whatever your crime of choice is. But you know how it is when you see these things on social media or local news where it's like, oh, the jewelry store got robbed, and there's cameras all over the place. All right. But the cameras do absolutely no good because the guy, has the mask on, the full hoodie, the completely covered up in all black. And all you're doing is looking at a figure that looks like he's in a snowstorm, dressed for a snowstorm, taking all the jewelry out of the cases. So you can't, it's good luck trying to find that. It's kind of hard. You're giving yourself a fighting shot as a criminal to not be caught. With the deed scam, with the property theft, there's so much of a paper trail. You're going to get caught eventually. In fact, and you're going to go to prison. So it's not a very good scam in the sense that you get some money for a while, but you're going to end up in prison in like 3 to 5 years eventually. So
Yeah, you can usually track the money, even if you don't get that first transaction. And like you said, they form an LLC, and we've seen it go through 3, 4 LLCs. But at some point, once you finally try to offload it, there's going to be a title company, somebody's driver's license is getting photocopied, or since COVID, the use of online notaries has really gone up. We've had recordings of seeing the person come on the Zoom and do the notarization,
Yeah.
and it became clear that they were not the person. So,
Yeah, and you can do everything you can to try to, obfuscate and not get caught. But someone like us, Chris, or I mean, I don't care how many LLCs you form, I'm eventually going to trace the money, okay, and find out where it went to. So this is not a long term, thinking criminal. I mean, this is not a criminal that thinks about how can I get away with this and not go to prison eventually. This is very much a short term criminal scheme. So um, how do you prevent it?
there's services now that it's not secret. We could do it. I just for our lawyer time, it's not worth our time and money. But if you were to start a business where they just monitor the deed records, if you had 10,000 people paying you $10 a month just to research their name and see if there were a hit on their name in the deed records, it's probably worth your time to hire a bunch of staff and do that.
Yeah.
You can't stop it, but I think that's what they do. They just monitor it. They run a search, and if they see something pop, either a deed of trust or a transfer, then they immediately alert you and they say, call a lawyer.
Yeah. There are services out there. They are $15 a month. I don't know if they're a good deal or not, or if they do a good job. I learned that there are some counties now, Chris, that have kind of free services for an email alert.
Nice. I mean, we get that as lawyers, so it makes perfect sense. They are set up for that. If someone files into a case, I can get an alert. So if they file on the certain deed records, I imagine be the same trigger. So I think that's
Yeah,
great.
I mean, I don't know if they work or not either, and then of course you can just check the public records all the time. So what do we do as lawyers to fix it if someone comes to us and they're like, "Hey, I was completely defrauded. This was not me. It's just complete bogus fraud deed." There's a process, Chris, and you may have used this under the Texas Government Code at section 51.903. It's an expedited process, it's an ex parte process where you basically file a motion with the district court and they have to look at it. It has to be obvious fraud, and a district court judge will then void the deed. Um, have you done those before? Or I know we've had attorneys in our firm that have done them. I don't.
Yeah, we've had varying degrees of success. If there's an innocent party at the end, it's going to be hard to get that set aside. If it's just one person, and we've had some success when, say, mom was dead and the deed was executed after her death. We've had success saying, Judge, there's just no way. This is absolutely void on its face. But if it's, Roy Garcia who signed it, and there's 18,000 Roy Garcias in Houston, they're not going to just look at it and say, that's clearly fraud. They're going to make you go find the grantee, sue them, get them to court, or at least prove that you served them and say, okay, now that we've given them the opportunity to say, no, that's me, we'll go ahead and we'll give you a default or give you summary judgment.
Yeah. I will point out, I mean, the basic of this process is you file a motion for the district court. Interestingly, there's no filing fee for this process. The district court is prohibited from taking a filing fee when you're doing this kind of trying to remove a fraudulent deed. And then they'll review it. They'll make a determination without the other side. And then if they find that it's actually fraud, they'll issue basically an order that voids the deed. Chris is 100% correct, though. The judges can be very reluctant. They're like, well, maybe this isn't fraud. So if it's not fraud, they want you to go into the normal quiet title action type of case where you're trying to do a full lawsuit where someone has to be served. And that's a much more expensive process. I will point out, Chris, you mentioned the innocent purchaser defense. Can you tell listeners generally what that is?
Well, in real estate, we have a concept of someone being a bona fide purchaser, meaning, hey, I'm not the bad guy. I didn't know anything was wrong. And sometimes it works as a defense. Sometimes sometimes it's kind of irrelevant. If someone steals my property, even if you didn't know, you don't get my property. But so they'll just say, hey, I'm not the guilty party here. I didn't know anything that was going on. Okay, great. So just give me my property back then. You take it out on the other guy.
Yeah.
But there's other situations where, recording versus noticed, where a bona fide purchaser may end up with title if they did everything right and someone else missed a step.
And I think, Chris, the important part for people to understand is if you've been defrauded, the buyer, even though they may have been innocent and may have not known what was going on, although that's kind of debatable, because if you're a buyer and you're getting this big discount, you probably, should think something maybe is going on, but you don't get the innocent purchaser defense. And the idea is that the void deed, the fraud deed, is void on its face. Under the law, I think there's a Latin term for it called void ab initio, and it just means it's void on its face. Okay, and that doesn't matter in the slightest, except I want people to know how smart I am. But basically, if it's a fraud deed, you get it unwound. You don't get the innocent purchaser defense. So, and so, yeah, that's what we do as lawyers to try to help that. We've done lots of those cases, so it's available, a remedy if you've been defrauded. All right, let's go ahead and move on to our next legal question, and this is, what do I do if I bought a vacant property in Texas and I don't want it anymore? And when we get into these, we're talking about, let me set this up, Chris. So it's usually like a hardworking person, and they're living in a major city like Dallas or Houston or Austin, and they see these advertisements that say, hey, come buy this beautiful property on a river or a small pond or a lake, and you can hunt and fish and have peace, and you can retire there one day. So they go out they get them all out there at the sales office where this property is on a weekend, and they engage in these really high pressure sales tactics like, buy today, buy now. If you don't buy, the price is going up, or it's today only. So they enter into a contract, they buy it. And a lot of times they're like very inexpensive properties, $5,000, $6,000, $20,000, $30,000. And then they own the property, and then they go home, and then they immediately regret the decision. And okay, so fine, they regret the decision. They try to get out of it. They can't get out of it usually. So they just think they keep paying the loan on it. They keep paying these HOA fees, and then they realize that they're not going to use this property. They also, Chris, will find out that the property does not have utilities on it. They find out that the developer made all these promises of these amenities being developed, like we're going to have roads and a tennis court and a pool, and none of that comes to fruition. And now they've got a property they're stuck with paying a mortgage, paying taxes, and paying HOA fees. Have we had these before? Have you seen these before, Chris?
Yeah, this is, you're going way back again. This is the stuff we started out with. I remember this, and not knowing anything about this industry, and I called up one of the developments one time. I said, "What? Y'all promised a road. Y'all said our guy's house is going to be developed within a year. It's been 3. You're not even on the block next to his yet. You guys are taking forever. Oh, well, he can still use our pool. He can still come rent out the clubhouse for any event that he wants." And of course, it's in the middle of nowhere. No one's going to do that, but they're tricksters. That's what they're doing. They're trying to make it look like, oh, well, you're getting what we promised, and we're still working. Don't you worry. World-class service awaits.
Yeah. There's another variation on that scam. I mean, they're taking the HOA fees as revenue, and the poor buyer is paying these very large HOA fees, are not sustainable. But there's another variation on the scam where it's basically a foreclosure mill. So they get them in these loans and these very high rates of interest, and then they churn, they just do a foreclosure and churn the buyer out, right? Ruin their credit, collect the high rates of interest, sell it again, and keep doing it. It's very similar to the whole Long Point, Southwest Houston used car deal, right? So if you go to Long Point or you go to Southwest Houston to buy a used car, those guys are not selling used cars. They're selling financing. And I learned that one time because I like to buy, I would call them modern classics, Chris. My wife would call them like old junkers that nobody wants, but I like to buy modern, classics like older Mercedes, older BMW. So I went down to a used car lot in Southwest Houston and I tried to, I thought, hey, I went to go buy this BMW. It was a little 3 Series BMW. I can't remember what it was, 10, 11 grand or something like that. I offered the guy, I was like, hey, take 10 grand for it. It was priced at like 10.5. And he was like, we'll let you know. And I'm like, you don't want to take $500 off the car? I'm gonna buy it right now. And no, no, no. They are, and I quickly learned, Chris, they are not in that business. Okay. They're in the business of people needing credit, charging high rates of interest. And then when they don't pay, they send the repo man out, get the BMW back.
Car going to be 10 times easier because you don't have to go through anything. You just go snatch
up the car. But the concept with this was the same, these foreclosure mills that they're doing, same concept, sell the lot, high rate of interest, high HOA fees, the buyer defaults, they do the foreclosure, do it all over again. That's the scam. So, what can we do as attorneys to maybe help these people, Chris? Do you any ideas or things you remember from?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm curious what these, get out of your timeshare outfits do, but my guess is the playbook would be, try to work with them. The people that sold it to you, that's very low likelihood that they're going to say, oh yeah, we'll take it back. But on the off chance they'll just take it back for a fee, you're probably best off just paying something to give it back. Then it's go through the contract, go through the HOA, CCNRs, see if you can find anything they're violating that you can use against them. If you can't find anything, if strongly worded letters and threats of litigation don't work, then you either can sue them and try to get out of it, or you can try to offload it, either selling it at a discount to somebody, or what we've done, and I don't know how successful we were, but we did it, just transferring it to an LLC so that when you stop making the payments, you say, well, I don't own it. It goes through my LLC. The LLC has a property in it.
Yeah.
So if you want the property, we go get it.
And those are all things we have done in the past. The setting up the shell LLC, deeding it into the property has been effective. There are some negatives to that, not a perfect solution, right? But a really good solution for some people that deserve some kind of result. And I don't feel bad when we do that. There's, if I were to kind of expand on some of the negatives, someone could allege that these people are committing some sort of fraud by deeding the property to the LLC and all that. Well, I tell you what, you want to come sue my hardworking plumber for fraud for deeding the property into the LLC when he's basically been the victim of rampant, corporate real estate fraud. Good luck with that case. Okay. So we've done some of that. And of course you can sue these people, the fraudsters, the scammers, the developers, the unscrupulous developers for deceptive trade practices and real estate fraud and all that. Oftentimes the people that we're representing don't have the money or the stomach to do that. So we're just trying to get them out of the property. So, yeah. All right. That brings us to my favorite part of the show, rant and rave section. I just learned about this, Chris. I did not know this was going on. I noticed that some of our posts that I thought would be really, really popular, good posts, were just like not even getting any views. And I'm like, why is that? That's a really awesome, awesome post. And it turns out that there are certain words, Chris, that oftentimes we have to say as lawyers to address real issues and legal news that you're not allowed to say. So I don't want to say them because I don't want to, get this podcast buried or whatever. But what I'm going to do, Chris, is I'll describe some things we're not allowed to say, and you just nod and say yes. And remember to say yes, because people listen to the show on Spotify and they're not watching, and people also watch on YouTube. So I'm going to describe, and you say yes if you get what we're not supposed to say for future things. Okay. So Chris, we did a piece, I think last show, where there may have been a football player that had some problems with certain substances. You're allowed to say the football player's name. You just don't want to say any of those substances. And what you're supposed to say if you're talking about substances, and Chris, as lawyers, we often talk about these substances. We can say things. Oh man, there's a new law about cookies. So
I don't
okay,
know.
so you know what I'm describing, Chris? Yeah.
I do. I think the warning or the key that I'm going to go off of is when I see something online and people use an emoji
Okay.
to describe like a snowflake, that would make
That's
sense. It's they,
yes.
yeah,
There's a lot of that going on, and then there's a lot of pieces we did, Chris, that I never would have thought would be buried, but it seems like they have been buried. And certain presidents, political figures. Okay.
I told you that. I told you that for sure,
Okay.
Phil. You can't say a president's
Okay.
name for
Okay.
sure.
Now you can say some president's name.
Oh,
You
you're
can
right.
you can
You're right.
say left leaning or more liberal presidents of the Democratic Party. But if you say a conservative president's name that may be in office now, that post is highly likely to be buried and scrutinized. Did you know that, Chris?
Yeah, I think we talked about that. I don't want to bring in personal history, although I kind of want an update now. We brought that up when you talked about your wife getting banned from social
Okay.
media.
All right. Well, so everyone knows that president. And it's unfortunate because he signs a lot of executive orders that we have to talk about that have to do with real estate and housing. And how are we going to talk about the guy's name, right? And there's even been some instances where his name is actually also a verb. Okay. So
It's
you may
true.
want to use that name as a verb, and you can't even use the verb. And the stupid social media companies have ruined the English language. So
Yeah, what if I'm playing pinochle?
right.
I gotta be able to use that
Right,
word.
exactly. So, all right, and then there's things that I wouldn't even have thought of. There are certain dictators that lived in Germany that you're not supposed to say that were awful dictators, right? If you say that guy's name, your post will be buried. Okay, so
I believe
yeah,
that. Plus, we should all just stop saying that. We should stop using that as a comparison to anyone ever because it's hard to believe anyone is that bad.
yeah.
Or maybe we don't need to compare everyone.
Well, some people are that bad. Okay, but we're not going to go into that in that term. Um, And then we were earlier in the show, we were talking about different crimes, and I specifically didn't mention a word because you can go commit an armed robbery, and if you're going to commit that armed robbery, you're typically going to have a certain device that you hold in your hand that could do people harm. But if you say that word, your post may or your podcast may also get buried, Chris. So we're not going to say that word anymore. You know what word I'm thinking about, right? So
Anything that has to do with violence, anything that has to do with illicit substances
mm.
or adult content. I don't know if that's the next one on your
Well,
list.
our job is going to be really hard as lawyers to talk about the news and legal concepts, right? Good luck if you're a criminal lawyer. So it's like you're never going to be able to talk about anything on your podcast. So
I see. So yeah, obviously I get a lot of lawyer content, and you know, they put those emojis out there, and so like how captions, and I think you do it for the podcast. The captions show the words as we're talking, and they either allude to it or they'll put emojis to that everybody knows what you're talking
yeah,
about. So
well,
I get it. You got to try those tricks. I still get the criminal lawyer content, even though I'm not even a criminal lawyer. But
well, this is all completely stupid, and it is a First Amendment violation, if you ask me, and it's another example of just social media and tech companies just being ridiculously crooked and their censorship is out of control. That's my rant on this thing.
but it's not coming from the government. And I know we've talked about this too.
Mm,
So private entities can censor you all they want. If you put this on YouTube, YouTube's free to do whatever they want. They're not governed by the
well,
First
okay.
Amendment.
Well, that maybe that law needs to change. So because if you're this is the public square, if you're now censoring in the public square and the censorship is now being done by private tech companies, then I think that's a societal problem that we need to address. But your point is well taken that the law has been very much in tech's favor on censorship of the private platform, right? So okay.
No, I know we talked about that one before. Hey, I got a bonus rant and raver, bonus legal question for
Okay.
you. really, really quick before you try to sign off the
Bonus,
show.
yeah.
I'm sure you've had this scenario. If you have children
Okay.
and you know kids love to trade things at school,
Right.
if your child, I'm not going to tell you which side
Yeah.
you're on, you can be on each
Yeah.
side. Your child comes home having either given something away or received
Yeah.
something of very disparate value.
Yes. Yes.
What is your
Yes.
take on
Okay.
that?
So that very common thing. I've had 4 kids. I've got a couple kids, 3 kids a little bit older than Chris's kids. So happens all the time. Kid goes to school, has a valuable Pokemon card. This was my older kids. It was Pokemon. They get some very valuable Pokemon card in exchange for nothing. And my position on that is you probably need to call the other parents and be like, "Hey, this was a disparate, kind of trade, and I just want to even this up. Give it, go ahead and redo it, right?" Well, what do you think? You like that, or the second grader is stuck with it?
No, I agree with you, and I've been on both sides, and
Uh,
I actually, the older one was the recipient, and we actually took the initiative,
Right.
and we said, hey, we contacted the mother and said, hey, this can't be right. I'm sure you are not happy that your child gave this to our child. We will be returning it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Today, we're in the opposite boat with the younger child who has never traded anything before in his life, but yesterday decided to trade something of significant value for something of absolutely zero value. So we're hoping to recover. It's on principle.
Yeah. Yeah. If you need a good lawyer on that recovery, okay, I'm just thinking that the minors do not have contractual capacity, so the trade would be voidable at the election of the minor. So
Hope that's
we're gonna.
right. I'm gonna let him
I
in my
don't. I
back
don't
pocket.
think that the fact that you traded with another minor is a defense to the contract be not being voidable by either minor. Okay, and
My bigger concern too is that other child is lost or already traded it to somebody else
we can just
because
keep going down
the
down the
kid.
trade line, Chris. Well, if we need to shut that school down, Chris, we'll shut it down. Okay. If we have, that's what we do. All right. That brings our show to a close. I've been your host, Phil Silverman. Chris Hill has been my co host today. Like us, follow us, review us wherever you get your podcasts. And as a reminder, nothing in this show is to be considered legal advice. And this has all been for entertainment purposes only. Everybody have a great weekend.